What's the first thing you think of when you hear the word Subnautica? I'll give you 5 seconds to answer. Alright, time's up. Chances are you probably said either the environments, the creatures, the leviathans especially, the technology, and all the fancy jazz in between. What I bet most of you didn't say was the surprisingly deep lore of Subnautica. And I mean, to be fair, it makes sense if you didn't say that. But I've always been pretty intrigued by Subnautica's lore. So today, in preparation for Subnautica 2, which is probably going to expand the universe even more, I'm going to go through the entire timeline of Subnautica, Subnautica Below Zero, and try to explain as much as I can about the universe and what goes on in the history of the games. Obviously, there are going to be heavy spoilers for both games in the franchise, so I highly recommend you play both of these and go through their story, then come back to this video. Alright, y'all got that? Let's dive in then. We begin our journey around 1,000 years before the events of the first game, during what I am presuming to be the 13th and 14th centuries, which I'm basing off the ancient earth blade we find in the primary containment facility, which is stated to be from around the 13th century. Anyways, we are following the Architects, an ancient, heavily advanced civilization which were so damn smart and tech savvy that they've completely evolved past their need for their evolutionary bodies, and instead choose to navigate space-time in conjunction with mobile biomechanical storage media. These extremely advanced aliens have created technologies like phase gates, the ability to upload their consciousness to computers, and teleportation. So yeah, these guys were pretty smart. We get that now. So during a routine expansion of their empire, they come across a currently unknown planet that holds an extremely deadly pathogen that will one day come to be known as the bacterium. But I'm sure that won't be an issue for this super advanced civilization that has quite literally evolved past the need for their own bodies. They've probably dealt with this kind of thing before and have many set precautions in order to stop this bacterium from decimating their civilization. Oh wait, this bacterium is actually decimating their civilization. Yeah, the bacterium made it off-world and into the Architects' empire, infecting and killing 143 billion architects throughout their core worlds. And by the way, this is only confirmed deaths. Just saying. With their species now teetering on the edge of extinction, the Architects begin setting up research outposts on distant planets, hoping to study and find a cure for the Kara. It is on one of these research outpost planets that our story begins. The Architects arrive on planet 4546b, located in the Ariadne arm of an unknown galaxy. There, they begin constructing multiple facilities in a long dormant volcanic crater to begin studying the bacterium. This of course includes the disease research facility to test the bacterium on the native species, the quarantine enforcement platform to shoot down any incoming or outgoing craft should shit go sideways, and the alien thermal plant in order to harvest the planet's natural thermal energy as cheap, easy power. The disease research facility is also where the Architects begin building warpers, biomechanical robotic creatures created from combining tons of off-world species with their own technology to create programmable guards and hunter-killers. They also build some caches, a fabricator base, and a phase gate in Sector 0, a frozen continent on the other side of the planet. This will be important later, okay? Just trust me. The Architect research mission is being led by Al Ann, an esteemed Architect scientist who has made many scientific contributions that his species admired. Okay, cool. So we got a high-profile research mission being led by a well-admired and esteemed alien scientist. I'm sure all the bright minds in this mission won't make any fatal miscalculations that will lead to the bacterium breaking out and causing a major mass extinction. Anyways, while studying and testing the bacterium on many different native life forms, they discover that a species of leviathan known as the Sea Emperor Leviathan is producing an enzyme known as enzyme 42 that is effective at stopping the bacterium and could be turned into a cure. Thus, they construct a final facility in the depths of the volcanic crater known as the primary containment facility, where they bring a nursing Sea Emperor Leviathan and its 7 eggs to study them. Now is a very good time to mention that the Sea Emperor Leviathan is capable of telepathically communicating with other creatures, and is also very old. Right now it's around 1,600 years old. So while she can produce enzyme 42 by herself, it's a crappier version that only delays the bacterium. So Al Ann and the other Architects set their sights on her 7 babies, which they think when hatched will produce a much better enzyme for combating the bacterium. Alright, so they get to work, but are unable to make the eggs hatch. They dissect one of the eggs, but the baby Leviathan dies during the process, making its enzymes unusable. They took one of the other eggs eggs for testing but still couldn't elicit any hatching response from it. This is because the eggs require another substance known as hatching enzymes, which requires plants from numerous biomes that are the leviathans' natural habitats. The Sea Emperor tries to communicate to the architects to tell them this, but they can't hear it. I'm gonna chalk it up to the architects being cybernetic biomechanical beings. Because of this, their attempts to force the hatching fail, and they attach the remaining 5 eggs to an incubator whilst they figure out their next move. Needing a way to elicit a hatching response from the Emperor eggs, Alan notices that another leviathan named the Sea Dragon is quite closely related to the Sea Emperor, which makes him think that if he incubates their eggs, he could figure out what can make the Emperor babies tick. Disobeying the directive from the greater architect network, Alan steals Sea Dragon eggs from a breeding adult and takes them to the disease research facility in the Lost River. Whilst Alan's theory wasn't wrong, this move pisses off the Sea Dragon parent, of course, and it tracks down its eggs to the facility. It immediately attacks the facility by ramming into the exterior anchor cables and causing the facility to begin sinking. Breaches in the wall of the complex begin releasing the bacterium into the environment, infecting numerous species. I cannot begin to express how unbelievably stupid Alan was for this. The architects were obviously on the planet for a long while in order to build all of these facilities, including 2 right smack dab in the lava zone, meaning Alan and the other architects were well aware of how aggressive the sea dragons were. Stealing eggs from an aggressive, carnivorous, Godzilla-sized underwater lizard that breathes fire has absolutely got to be the dumbest possible route the architects could have taken. As far as we're aware, the facility doesn't have any defenses besides warpers and probably some generic laser rifles, meaning Alan was beyond dumb to bring the eggs here and not to a facility further away from the lava zones. Seriously, if he ever gets in contact with his species again, they should unironically delete his consciousness as punishment for completely screwing over their best shot at a cure and causing the near extinction of their species. Okay, rant over. The sea dragon, being severely injured by the attack, dies shortly afterward in another area of the Lost River, and the bacterium begins infecting everything on the planet. So the architects initiate a planetary quarantine, they begin evacuating, they activate the quarantine enforcement platform, and order all of their warpers to begin killing creatures infected with the Kara. Some upload their minds to the many caches around the crater, while many others just succumb to the bacterium. Alan, meanwhile, gets his consciousness uploaded to a very special super storage media in a cube in Sector 0. As for why, I have no idea. He doesn't deserve this special storage since he completely fucked over this operation. Anyways, yeah, the Kara bacterium spreads across the planet and initiates a mass extinction event, killing off many species including every last wild sea emperor leviathan, after destroying their food source. The survivors will be forced to rapidly adapt to the extinction event, which is helped by the sea emperor training peepers to carry her shitty enzyme 42 to the surface, helping life at least survive in the crater surrounding her prison. After this, it is presumed that the architects just went extinct, although maybe some populations survived somehow, waiting for a cure to be brought back. Following the demise of the architects, we are now going to cut to the near future of humanity, a future in which humankind is beginning to spread across the galaxy. Earth remains the center of humankind in space until something changes everything: the discovery of phase gate travel. This method of faster than light travel enables humanity to expand much further than ever before. The people on these distant colonies soon declared their independence from Earth, which we'll refer to as the Sol Transcope from now on. The discovery of phase gate travel was followed closely by an event known as the Expansion, which is implied by the PDAs to be a massive conflict between many nations in space. This conflict was egged on by a mega corporation known as Altera, who began life as a defense manufacturer in the mid-22nd century. Altera supplied arms to all sides during the war, in order to profit from it and grow its workforce, which by the way is horrendously fucked up. They literally egged on a galactic war which probably killed millions of people by supplying arms to the warring countries. Anyways, Altera later threatens to cease its arms trade, which leads to a turning point in the expansion and eventually the end of the conflict. It is here that 37 governing entities, including Altera and Sol, sign the charter and transform into trans governments. This also establishes the trans-system federation between the transgovs in order to enforce the charter. With this, humanity continues to expand across the stars. We're now cutting to around 3 decades prior to the crash of the Aurora, a vessel known as the Mercury II owned by the Sol Transgov, who are in control of Earth's solar system as implied by both its name and the Mercury II sharing a name with one of our planets, and who are also implied by some cut data entries to be a fully communist government with a flat social structure, common goods to all of their citizens, and no internal currency. So yeah, it looks like Earth in this universe is controlled by a fully communist government. Anyways, the Mercury II is returning to Sol, being commanded by Captain Diana with numerous crew members on board. We'll go for some of the important ones real quick. Elliot, a xenolinguist, Stephanos, a nice Greek guy who is a ship's engineer, and Yasmin. While on its way through the 4546 system, the Mercury II passes by planet 4546b, and the xenolinguist, Elliot, scans the surface of the planet and detects the numerous architect structures scattered around the surface. He successfully convinces the captain, Diana, to land the Mercury II on planet 4546b to explore the alien bases. They bring the Mercury II closer to the planet to try and land it on the surface, and the quarantine enforcement platform of course is going to detect it and fires on the vessel. I'll give Diana just one thing, and it's that she knows how to pilot a fucking ship, as she makes the ship fire off flares and dump the nuclear reactor's water, which is super hot, so it confuses the enforcement platform, making it miss. Despite their distraction and evasive maneuvers, the sonic boom from the evaporating water still forces the Mercury to make an emergency landing in the Arctic spires of Sector 0. Diana takes a minute to suck her own dick.
My instincts are never wrong.
Elliot leads a team out to the water to find themselves some damn aliens, son, while Stephanos leads a repair of the Mercury's damaged thrusters. Whilst out on the ice, Elliot's team detects an SOS, which we will later learn is being broadcasted by Alan, who is still dormant inside that damn cube. They enter the water to follow the signal, and while in there are attacked by the wildlife. Wildlife in quotes. I personally think that they are attacked by warpers. Elliot only describes whatever attacked them as something.
They got ripped to shreds by something.
But since he is a scientist and would be able to describe a brute shark or a squid shark as being shark-like, but not a warper, which looks much more alien. Anyways, the warpers murder half his team and he somehow escapes with his life. He also notices that the Kara is infecting creatures in Sector 0, showing us that the Kara right now is planet-wide. Meanwhile, people sent out into the Arctic spires are attacked by ice worms, as described by Stephanos, who is literally just sitting on his ass back at the ship, repairing the thrusters and hanging with Yasmin whilst his people are being ripped apart and slaughtered by ice worms and warpers. And if that isn't bad enough, crew members are also starting to show signs of being infected by Kara, alarming Diana, who begins making preparations for an emergency takeoff. So yeah, they had to quarantine the infected crew, who definitely died painful deaths alone in that cave shortly after, or just got killed by an ice worm. Meanwhile, the Mercury II takes off but gets targeted by the enforcement platform again. This time they aren't so lucky though, and the ship sustains a direct hit and is shot down, killing Diana, Elliot, and many other crew members.
I'm alive. Stephanos saved me. The Mercury attempted an emergency takeoff and everything seemed fine. I was helping the bridge crew with the emergency takeoff since the crew was short-handed because of everything. I heard the sound of metal tearing and for a split second, everything was tinged bright green and unbearably hot. Then I saw daylight and I was looking down at the ocean and ice. The strongest wind I've ever felt roared in my ears, ripping through the ship. People went flying out the side of the Mercury, so much screaming and chaos. I was lucky. I had just clipped into my seat anchor. Stephanos came out of nowhere, like a malaika, an angel. I felt his rough, calloused hand grasp mine with the gentlest of urgency. It felt like time slowed, he said. I gotcha. Just follow me, Ella. I don't know how, but he used an emergency tether to drag me to the nuclear reactor core, the strongest bulkhead in the ship. We hit the water and everything went black. He's sleeping. I think he might have hit his head. I'm exhausted. The adrenaline has long since worn off and my body aches. I think I might have fractured the rib. I'm gonna shut my eyes for a bit. When I wake up, I'll figure this out. I'll save us.
Promising to save herself and Stephanos, Yasmin goes to sleep, but presumably never wakes up again. The Mercury II now lies erect in Sector 0, split into 3 parts that are scattered across the frozen continent. Continuing the theme of passing ships getting wrecked by the quarantine enforcement platform, we travel to 1 decade before the Aurora's crash, following the Degasi, a Mongolian vessel piloted by Torgal Corporation CEO Paul Torgal. The Torgal Corp hails from the Mongolian Independent States, a fast-growing transgov that is literally just a galactic Mongol empire. I guess in this universe, Genghis Khan was reincarnated and brought his fellow Mongolians glory by conquering the stars. Awesome. Paul is accompanied by Bart Torgal, his only legitimate son and heir to his corporation. Bart isn't interested in being a stoic venture capitalist though, and is more like me when I play Subnautica, just absolutely obsessed with alien biology. He's also accompanied by Marguerite Meta, a badass freelance mercenary Paul commissioned for extra security, plus 3 more unnamed crew members. The Degasi is on its way to a Mongolian space station in the Ariadne Arm, passes by the 4546 system towards planet 4546b when Paul makes an unscheduled detour to an uncharted planet. A stupid decision that Marguerite is quick to call him out for.
I know enough not to take unscheduled detours to uncharted planets. That's something you don't want to learn the hard way.
So same deal with the Mercury. The quarantine enforcement platform fires at the Degasi, but this time directly hits the ship instead of missing like it did with the Mercury. The Degasi crash lands on planet 4546b in the crater, killing the 3 unnamed crew members, whilst Paul, Bart, and Marguerite escape in a life pod. They drift in the life pod with some ocean storms outside as described by Paul, and eventually wash up on the shores of a landmass, being held up by giant floaters when the weather clears. The survivors salvage the Degasi wreck for metal and build their first base on the floating island. Paul is ecstatic at finding this landmass with no predators and fresh food among the waves, but Marguerite isn't so sure, convinced that since they're surrounded by ocean, they have no choice but to go deeper. Meanwhile, Paul just wants to stay on the island and wait for rescue, and Bart is forced to act as the peacekeeper between the two. This is the dynamic that will define their interactions through the Degasi storyline. The weather soon turns evil on the trio, and a massive storm hits the floating island, flooding their grow beds. Bart wants to go out and drain the grow beds of the stormwater so, they can actually eat, but Paul refuses, saying his life is much too profitable for him to risk. Marguerite scares the shit out of Paul real quick just to teach him a lesson, and Paul eventually lets Bart go back to the grow beds.
You know how to drain those grow beds of 40 tons of stormwater? Or how to conjure food from the air?
I know how to prioritize.
I'm just saying, if that's so, what's your boy's life worth to you today? If tomorrow you're gonna be so hungry you start wondering what he tastes like, let him go deal with the plants.
Son, go deal with the plants.
Paul responds by threatening to leave Marguerite on the planet, which she just brushes off like a pro. Soon enough, they find an architect purple tablet on the beach of the island and surmise that they're not the first ones to come to the planet, with Marguerite correctly assuming the beings to be aliens. A few more days of rain and a landslide later, and their habitat is half buried and food washed away, making Marguerite so pissed she just hits Paul in the face. The trio then decide to relocate to the Jelly Shroom Caves, a very solid base location that has tons of materials and just looks fucking beautiful. Bart is like me when I go to the Jelly Shroom Caves and is just admiring all the glowing fish, beautiful jelly shrooms, and deadly crab snakes. Bart wants to build some equipment to study the life forms in the caves, but needs more enameled glass, which, as you all probably know by now, needs stalker teeth. Marguerite listened to the kid and went out to the kelp forest and fought a pack of stalkers for their teeth. Good job taking initiative, Marguerite. You're already doing more to get those teeth than I do. I just wait in my Seamoth for them to drop their teeth for me. Marguerite's also doing more than Paul right now, who's just sitting in the habitat being a total fucking deadbeat, trying to indoctrinate his son into his rich guy mindset. This frustrates Maida, who's sick and tired of Paul being a bourgeois bozo, and plots to leave the other 2 behind in order to go deeper and find out what shot them down. You don't have to go that deep, I'm just saying. She eventually builds herself a Seamoth and begins exploring, trying to find a way to go deeper, as seen in the cinematic trailer. Also in the cinematic trailer, you can see a Reaper attack and destroy a Seamoth, which I now theorize to be Marge's. It makes plenty of sense that her Seamoth got destroyed, since we know she ended up staying with the bourgeois pair. So her Seamoth is wrecked by a Reaper Leviathan, and she swims back to the habitat in the caves, which by now is leaking water. Bart finds something on the scanner, an alien base, likely the disease research facility in the Lost River, which makes Maida decide to convince Paul to take them deeper towards the Deep Grand Reef, 500 meters below sea level. After some thinking, Paul decides to listen to Maida, and they go even deeper, building a base in the aforementioned biome. Their tensions reach an all-time high, with Paul holding himself and Bart up in the base and refusing to go outside, whilst Marguerite wants to go even deeper deeper and find the alien structures. Bart soon discovers that all 3 of them are infected with the Kara bacterium, which has infected every single creature on the planet by this point. Marge decides to help him by bringing him specimens to study, but usually just brings them in either dead or dying, frustrating Bart's efforts. Marguerite eventually attacks, maims, and tows the Reaper Leviathan to the base on the back of a Cyclops. This act sends Paul over the edge, rightfully worrying that the Leviathan isn't dead or that others might follow it. Paul, infuriated with Maida, wants her off the sea base, whilst Bart tries to mediate the argument and tell them that they're both wrong, that Paul's being too careful and Maida's being too reckless by just slaughtering all the creatures. But the two don't budge. Bart is done with this shit and decides to just go outside, with Paul yelling at him to bring his profitable ass back inside. Suddenly, a second Reaper Leviathan arrives at the Deep Grand Reef and approaches the base, alarming Marguerite. The Reaper attacks the base and tears a hole clear through the reinforced hull, throwing Paul out of the base.
Came out of nowhere. An alien kraken, bigger than a cyclops. Tore a hole clear through the reinforced hull. I barely got my breather in time. I told her. I said others would come. The rupture threw me clear of the habitat, and the monster turned and bore down on me. Just as its tentacles came within reach, Maida appeared out of nowhere. She had a sea glide in one hand, a jagged piece of scrap metal in the other. She meant to butcher that beast or die trying. The last I saw her, she had the metal lodged in its neck as the monster did its best to shake her, contorting off into the darkness. I'm certain she got her wish, one way or another. Then I thought I saw a light deep below me. I hoped maybe Bart had swum clear. I followed it. Now I wonder whether I saw anything at all. My oxygen is low. The habitat is gone. I can't see the sky. Something surely has the scent of my blood.
Maida continued to fight the creature and eventually killed it. She will eventually ride its corpse all the way across the open ocean towards Sector 0, where she will continue to survive for the next decade. Meanwhile, Bart managed to swim clear of the chaos and got back to the surface. He continued his efforts to make a cure for the Kara, building a new base closer to the shallows and trying to make friends with a peeper. The Kara continued to take hold of him, however, scaring his new friend, and he's even starting to see visions now, which many now theorize to be the Sea Emperor trying to communicate with him. Bart eventually goes back to the floating island and records one final log.
This is the first time I've seen sunlight in months. After all that time in the deep, I'd been dreaming of it. Now that I'm back here, I'm finding it hard to enjoy alone. Father was right. We should never have left this place. We shouldn't have gone so deep. They do not want us down there. Despite my best efforts, ill health is taking hold of me. Marguerite and Father are now part of the ecosystem of this incredible planet. It's reassuring to know that when I go, I'll join them. Until then, well, there's always the view.
We cut to 1 decade after the crash of the Degasi, where the Altera Corporation has launched the Aurora, their newest, snazziest, fanciest capital starship with a mission to build a phase gate in the Ariadne Arm. The ship is also secretly tasked with locating and rescuing the crew of the Degasi, and as such is planned to make a gravity slingshot maneuver around planet 4546b, and locate the Degasi using its advanced scanning suite. Altera wants to locate and rescue the crew in order to aid its diplomatic negotiations with the Mongolian states, and brought along a Mongolian diplomat named Yoki Kasar. With these 2 missions, the Aurora sets off from Altera space bound for the Ariadne Arm. 13 months post-launch, the Aurora has reached the 4546 solar system, performing a gravity slingshot maneuver around planet 4546b in order to locate the Degasi. The Aurora is fired at and struck on its starboard side by the Quarantine Enforcement Platform's laser. This sends the Aurora crashing towards the planet, but through the expert piloting skills of the ship's captain, Hollister, he is able to make her take a controlled descent towards the crater. Meanwhile, life pods 1 through 25 were successfully launched from the ship, whilst pods 26 through 50 were too damaged to be launched. 10 life pods make it to the crater in relatively shallow waters, whilst the others crash in open ocean, their occupants presumably slaughtered by packs of ghost leviathans. Captain Hollister, in an attempt to save his crew from certain death, orders Second Officer Keene to regroup the crew at the floating island, and intentionally crashes the ship into the crater in order to leave the ship in one piece, so his crew can contact Altera on his long-range radio. Captain Hollister refuses to evacuate and dies as the the Aurora crashes into the shallow sections of the crater, giving his life so his crew could have a chance to live. Way to do what's necessary, Captain. We salute you. But his efforts were for the most part in vain, as 9 of the 10 life pods that made it to the crater will end up being destroyed, with their occupants getting killed by the wildlife. Life Pod 5, meanwhile, landed in the Safe Shallows, a relatively safe region of the crater made up of vibrant coral reefs. Life Pod 5 contained Riley Robinson, the non-essential systems maintenance chief of the Aurora. When the pod jettisoned, Riley was hit in the face by a metal panel that got detached and flown off into his face. Riley was unconscious, whilst all the other crew members of the Aurora met their ends. Riley came to while a massive fire was blazing inside his life pod. He quickly put it out, and his PDA rebooted in emergency mode, a mode designed to keep him alive on 4546B until rescue. Riley disembarked the life pod whilst the PDA informed him that no humans were left alive aboard the Aurora. Riley descended into the depths and began constructing various tools and equipment to aid in his fight for survival, whilst living off the planet by eating various fish and getting water from bladderfish. After around a week, the Aurora experiences a quantum detonation of the drive core, blowing massive parts of the ship's wreckage to smithereens. Riley intercepts the distress signals from the now destroyed life pods and salvages blueprints and materials from many of them whilst learning of the fates of the occupants. He also gets contacted by the trading vessel Sunbeam, which is currently out on the far side of the 4546 system. They've detected the Aurora's automatic distress signal but are confused on whether or not the ship still requires assistance due to not getting a response. Avery Quinn, the ship's captain, decides to try to contact the ill-fated vessel again later. The Sunbeam eventually detects the debris field of the Aurora around 4546B, realizing the gravity of the situation. Avery charts a course for the planet and tells Riley that they will rescue him. Meanwhile, Riley continues to go about surviving on the planet, constructing a Seamoth at first, and bigger, more expensive vehicles like the Cyclops and the Prawn Suit. Riley also begins building his own sea base in the crater. The Sunbeam eventually arrives at 4546B and informs Riley they will be landing at a landmass in the northern regions of the crater. When Riley arrives at the island, he lays eyes upon the quarantine enforcement platform, which then activates and fires at the Sunbeam as it makes its way towards the surface.
Survivor, we see you. Man, I don't know how you held out down there. We broke an atmosphere, and we're descending towards the landing site. Is that a building down there? What do you mean you can't identify it? Hold on. No turning back now. Positions, everyone. Touching down in 10, 9, 8. It's coming from the building? Change course. Set thrusters to full.
After the destruction of the Sunbeam, Riley explores the QEP and attempts to deactivate the facility from its control room, but discovers that he's infected with the Kara bacterium and that infected individuals cannot disable the weapon. Realizing now that he is infected with an alien bacterium, Riley explores the Aurora, gets the blueprint for a Neptune escape rocket that Altera sent to the ship's computer for him, and repairs its blown drive core before descending deeper in search of answers. He arrives at the Lost River, an extensive cave system filled with acidic brine pools, which also contains the disease research facility, where he learns of the warpers and realizes that they are hunting him. With his infection becoming more severe and forming glowing green cysts on his skin, Riley descends deeper into the heart of the volcanic crater, where he learns of the now 2,600-year-old Sea Emperor Leviathan and where it's holed up at. He dodges sea dragons and arrives at the primary containment facility and follows the Sea Emperor's given instructions to hatch her remaining 5 eggs. Riley gains the blueprint for the Sea Emperor's hatching enzymes from the massive Leviathan, and uses the facility's on-site warp gates to collect all of the needed ingredients before fabricating them.
My young are swimming for the shallows. I thank you. Their freedom is my end. What will it be like, I wonder, to go to sleep and never wake up? Perhaps next we meet, I will be an ocean current, carrying seeds to a new land. Or a creature so small, it sees the gaps between the grains of sand. Farewell, friend.
Riley then comes in contact with the stable enzyme 42, which cures his infection and gets rid of the glowing green cysts. The Sea Emperors will eventually grow up and spread enzyme 42 across the planet, ending the Kara outbreak on 4546b. He then disables the QEP once and for all and constructs the Neptune escape rocket. Riley departs planet 4546b towards the nearest phase gate. Upon arriving, Riley is informed by Altera that before landing he must pay his outstanding balance of 1 trillion credits. Also upon his return to Altera, Riley probably made his odds of landing better by informing Altera of what he found on the planet, which piques Altera's interest in the uncharted ocean world. What happens to Riley afterwards is currently unknown, although I personally think Altera executed him to keep their discoveries a secret. Altera soon returns to 4546b, and with the enforcement platform now disabled and the Kara outbreak contained, they establish a permanent presence on the surface of the planet. Altera constructs several sea bases in both Sector 0 and presumably the crater as well. I just don't see them overlooking that extremely important region. It's also possible that they built bases elsewhere on the planet, although nobody knows for sure. In Sector 0 in particular, Altera constructs Outpost 0 for studying an architect base very close by, which is the Phase Gate base. Built a station to act as Sector 0's headquarters, and Phi Robotics, a robotics laboratory in the glacial basin. Altera hires a bunch of people to be deployed at Sector 0, and the most important one being Fred. Altera also hires Samantha Ayu, a roboticist whose sister Robin Ayu is very distrustful of the corporate trans government due to Altera buying out the research company she works for. Sam still hopes her sister is happy for her though, as she ships out to planet 4546b. While there, she develops a spy pangling, a robotic drone that replicates the appearance of local creatures called panglings. She also gets close to the rest of her group, the Frost Pack or whatever. She also begins to send her spy panglings to watch none other than Marguerite Maida, who has been surviving and thriving in Sector 0. Not all is well in Sector 0, however, as Fred, while out in his sea truck, arrives at a glacier to begin walking over to a base on the ice. While there, he's attacked by a pair of snowstalkers and falls into a hole leading to a cave containing the corpse of a gigantic frozen leviathan. And you guessed it, the creature is infected with Kara and has still active Kara pustules feeding off the dead creature. Fred reports this back to Altera, who takes a lot of interest in the dead animal and seals off the cave to begin extracting Kara for, you know, science. Altera constructs the Omega Lab in the Lilypad Islands to begin testing and mutating the Kara bacterium. They bring in head biologist Danielle Valenti, who says that the results are promising, that the Kara could give birth to life-saving treatments and a better understanding of the planet. Meanwhile, Fred confides to Samantha that he found a frozen leviathan that's infected with the Kara. She gets her confirmation, however, by interrogating one of the lab personnel who admits that they're mutating the Kara. Sam is understandably uncomfortable with Altera trying to mutate the bacterium and worries that it could get out and cause a galactic outbreak of Kara or end up as a bioweapon in the wrong hands. She starts out by complaining to her higher-ups that she feels unsafe, but they just get annoyed with her and send her off to Outpost 0, which is basically timeout for the employees in this sector. After they send her off to the outpost, she gets desperate. She first records a final message to Robin telling her everything that happened, then somehow acquires Enzyme 42 and manufactures a cure to the Kara? Pretty sure you have to go across the planet for that, Sam, but fuck it, I guess we need plot convenience. She stashes it in a cave, but then ends up meeting with Marguerite Maida, telling her of what's happening and what she's planning. Marge calls her out by saying she's thinking too small, and that she also has to seal off the entire cave by bombing it with explosives that she made for fission. Marge decides to also attack the Omega Lab at the same time, so nobody can restart Altera's research. Sam heads off towards the Leviathan site and begins setting up explosives around the perimeter of the cave, alarming Parvin, who was patrolling the site. Sam sets off the explosives, collapsing the cave and killing both her and Parvin. Alright, so while Sam died as a result of pure negligence, Marguerite Maida is a pro, and successfully attacks and destroys Omega Lab by ramming it with a sea truck and blowing the main labs up, destroying the Kara bacterium in Omega Lab. After this, Altera evacuates, and sends out a message to Robin informing her of her sister Sam's demise. When Altera actually rightfully blames her death on negligence, Robin remains unconvinced, and sets out to find out what really happened. Robin links up with one of her Xenoworks buddies, Cal or something, who takes her to planet 4546b on a spaceship, which you can see in the game's loading screen. Promising to find her way back, Robin takes off in a shuttle with a life pod attached to its back towards 4546b during a huge meteor shower, trailing one of the meteors in order to avoid detection from Alterra. This doesn't work out, obviously, and Robin's shuttle gets knocked around by the meteor, detaching her life pod and crashing into Sector 0. Robin quickly escapes the burning shuttle and makes it to her life pod in the shallow regions of Sector 0, where she immediately begins her search by building tools and equipment and heading towards the now abandoned Delta Station. Now you may be wondering, where the fuck has Alan been all this time? Don't worry, he's been chilling in his big floating storage cube this entire time. But alas, his cube is running out of power, so he begins broadcasting an SOS in order to attract somebody's attention. It's this SOS that Robin picks up whilst traveling through the twisty ridges. Robin will eventually make her way down to Alan's sanctuary cache, where she comes into contact with the last architect. Alan tells Robin that he has hours to live, prompting Robin to attempt to download his consciousness on her PDA. However, the architect facility actually detected hospitable capacity in her brain instead, a fact Robin realizes just a bit too late.
What's happening?
Transfer. Transfer complete.
How do you feel?
Why do you sound like you're inside my head?
The facility identified hospitable capacity within your cerebral cortex.
You are in my head? I offered you my PDA! Get out!
Oh no. Does your kind perceive a boundary between cybernetic and organic components?
My mind is not a component!
You sound angry. We will allow you a moment to process.
Don't you go silent on me. Hello? This isn't happening. This is not happening. That's the explanation. It's not happening.
Alan eventually returns and tells Robin that she must find and scan several architect body parts spread throughout the sector. With this goal in mind, along with her goal to find out what happened to her sister, Robin descends deeper into the Arctic waters. Robin will soon encounter Marguerite Maida while heading to Delta Station, who believes her to be an Alterra employee and warns her to stay away, disappearing as quickly as she arrived and not offering Robin any negotiations. Robin arrives at Delta Station and acquires a map of all the Alterra buildings in Sector 0, setting her sights onto Phi Robotics where her sister worked. Robin eventually wanders into Marguerite's kick-ass sea base, where she casually keeps a whole ass Reaper skull as a trophy. Fuck yeah, dude. Marguerite doesn't care about anything Robin says though, and says that she should just go somewhere else and disable Architect's communications tower instead. Robin follows Marge's instructions and disables the communications tower, making Marge invite her over to her greenhouse, where she gives her some fruit and information about Sam, where Robin learns of Omega Lab's destruction and Sam's plan to destroy the frozen leviathan. She also learns of Sam's cure being stashed in a cave. Robin heads off towards the glacial basin to complete her sister's work, exploring Phi Robotics and using her own spy pingling that she fabricated to get the Kara cure from a cave. Using this, she completes Sam's work and cures the frozen leviathan. That's cool and all, but I think it's finally time we build Alan a new body. With the alien in her head leading her towards his body parts, Robin travels throughout Sector 0, scanning all of the required body parts and acquiring their blueprints. Alan finally leads her down through a crystalline cave system towards the Fabricator Base, a standard medical facility the architects use to construct new storage media. Robin by now has grown suspicious of her new alien friend though, who is dodging her questions about what really happened on 4546b. Robin finally constructs all of the needed body parts and begins fabricating the body. When his body is complete, Robin transfers his consciousness to his new body, and after taking control of it, Alan tells Robin that the escape of the bacteria was his fault, since he obeyed his directive and caused the sea dragon to destroy the disease research facility. Despite this revelation, Robin still commits to helping Alan, who is now preparing to return to the Architect homeworld and make amends for his mistakes. Robin commits to joining Alan since she doesn't have another ride, and Alan tells her to meet him at the phase gate facility. When she arrives, he makes the final preparations and they go through a warp gate to another part of the facility, where Alan opens the phase gate in what is probably the coolest fucking sequence in all of Below Zero. Alan, needing to prepare the ship, enlists Robin's help in moving the energy mast into place, granting her control of 4 Architect arms. Robin accomplishes this, but not without a few mishaps, one of which almost kills her. But she gets the job done, returns to Alan, and watches as he fabricates the Architect ship. Afterwards, Robin comes into the ship. She realizes Alan has been fully integrated with the ship in order to pilot it, and tells him that she's ready to depart.
What will we find when we get there?
If I am the last of my kind, I will experience the sorrow of 10,000 souls dimming.
And if they survived?
With you, I am ready to face whatever awaits.
And that's the Subnautica timeline done. I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. I would like to thank all my members too, including my one Lapis blog member, THC. That's an interesting name.